So welcome everyone. For those that don't know me, I am Carrie McEachran, the CEO, the new CEO. I'm going to call myself new for a little bit longer anyway, of the Chamber of Commerce. And we're thrilled to have such a great turnout today to help us kick off 2023. We have almost 90 some chamber members, dignitaries, and local media here today. And it's evident that the business community is so interested in the work that's being done at Queen's Park on our behalf. And in speaking of Queen's Park, without further ado, I am honored to introduce our special guest, MPP Bob Bailey. Bob has been the member of Provincial Parliament for Sarnia Lambton since 2007. Prior to serving the hardworking people of Sarnia Lambton as an MPP, Mr. Bailey was employed at Nova Chemicals for more than 30 years. During his career at Queen's Park, MPP Bailey has served in many roles. Most recently, he was appointed as Parliamentary Assistant to the Solicitor General of Ontario and as a member of the Standing Committee on Justice Policy. So Bob is going to provide us with some brief remarks, and then we are going to jump into asking the questions that we received in advance of today's town hall. So just to let you know, we received a lot of questions. So again, evidence that everyone is really interested in the work happening in Toronto. So we won't get to all of them today. The ones that we don't get to, Bob has committed to answering each one individually and will be sent to him after today's town hall, and you will receive a response. So Bob wanted to ensure that you were aware of that. So without further ado, Bob, I am passing this over to you to give some remarks to everybody.
Well, thank you, Carrie. I want to thank you and the Chamber for hosting myself today and this opportunity to interact with the membership. I'm really looking forward to seeing all the great projects that you and the Chamber are undertaking. And I'm always available to help the Chamber with their advocacy efforts at Queen's Park. We've had a number of Queen's Park days in the past. Hopefully those might continue in the future. I'm prepared with Anthony in my office here in Sarnia to work with the Chamber if that's something you and the city or the county. I think it was always a joint effort. I'm certainly prepared to work with that again. I know now we're coming out of COVID. Hopefully we can get back to somewhat whatever normal is going forward. And I know that there are questions from the Chamber. Members have been submitted, and we should get to those first, but I'd like to open with some brief remarks. I've had the opportunity to do several media interviews during the last few weeks, reflecting on what was achieved in 2022 and also looking ahead to what I thought was in store for 2023. If you had a chance to read those interviews, I hope that you came away with what was my sense of accomplishment for the challenges that we all together here overcame, as well as a sense of pride and excitement in the number of issues that as a community we have successfully advanced and successfully advocated for. When I look back at all the announcements from the province of investments in people, businesses, and organizations of Sarnia Lambton in the last year, it really is amazing. We've announced the building and renewal of hundreds of long-term care beds in the community. Witness Sumac, I think 256 beds are going to be refurbished, and there's 100 brand new beds there. And we continue to increase investments in our local healthcare through Blue Water Health and our other local health partners. We made also a historic funding commitment for the long-needed, much promised, but finally the money is there for the withdrawal management in our community. $12 million plus for that facility. And I think if I remember right, there was since 2018, this is going back a couple of years, but since 2018, Blue Water Health received a total of $40 million in increased funding for both campuses, both in Petrolia and in Sarnia. We've also created opportunities for young people from all walks of life to train for prosperous careers in the skilled trades. Minister McNaughton created a new organization called Skilled Trades Ontario. The dollars flow through there to the different training centers that are managed and operated by either union, non-union folks, and of course the colleges where they participate as well. And we've also invested here locally in learning spaces in our public schools. In witness Gregory Hogan, the brand new separate school for Lambton Kent District school board, and of course, Arrow Village. I think there's 2 new classrooms going there, plus a number of other refurbishments for other classrooms and schools throughout the county. We've empowered Lambton College. I see the president of Lambton College is on here today to create and deliver transformative education and training programs of the future. And I'm thinking, for example, of nursing diplomas that will now be able to be studied and learned here at home. So we don't have the young men and women leaving the community to finish at a University of Windsor or Western, and then they maybe don't come back. So hopefully we'll be able to retain those young men and women here in this community. We've also been able to support a number of community groups and festivals and cultural events through the Chilliam Foundation, to the tune of many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we've also taken action to reduce red tape and get houses built to address the housing crisis that's in Ontario. Right now, I think the numbers are, we have 15 million people in this province of Ontario, which is unbelievable. And I think in the next 20 years, we see that going to up to 35 million. So in the next few years, there's going to be an enormous amount of growth, especially in the greater Toronto area, the Golden Triangle, the GTA. So we need to make accommodations for that. And I think the Premier, he's made a commitment for our government that we'll build 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. So that's a lofty goal, and we're going to have to move a lot of operations to do that. Just before I was negligent that I didn't acknowledge, I know there's a number of my colleagues on here, both municipally. I see a number of them. I won't try and single them out because I'll miss some. And of course, my federal colleague, MP Marilyn Gladue is on here as well. So I did want to give a shout out to my municipal and of course my federal colleague that's on here, and I appreciate being here today. So I did want to touch on the funding that we provide here locally. These are the municipalities. OSIF, that stands for the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. The municipal colleagues on here will know exactly what I'm talking about, but a number of the rest of you will too. So that came to a total of over $13 million locally. That'll be dollars spent here locally to improve sewers, waterways, a number of different capital projects. So those are very important to the local municipalities. So like I say, a total of 13 million when you roll the county in. And then the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. Now this applies to all of the municipalities. Some get more than others. And I know we could always do more, but it's over $10 million when you count the county in with all the municipalities. So those are all dollars that are very important to those municipalities. And I did want to touch on that. When I thought of that, it made me think of my colleagues that are here. So we've also connected thousands of new homes in the county to reliable high-speed internet. So maybe a number of people are joining us on this call today, maybe some for the first time because they've got reliable internet. And I know it's not through the whole county yet, but I know they're working every day. I see the GTEL and Vink, and I forget all the different names, but I see them on the side of the road when I'm coming back and forth to Sarnia or on the way to Toronto. And we also have got a further commitment on the Highway 40 twinning from Wellington Road to the Plank Road, actually to Indian, almost to Indian, I guess. There's about 7.5 kilometers altogether. Public consultations are supposed to start in the fall of 2023 about how that's going to work. So I finally got that in the budget a year ago that this was going to move ahead. So I said to the minister, look, this road has been promised for 40 years, the 4 lanes. It's unsafe. It needs to be finished. I said, there's no way I will go back and campaign again for re-election without some firm commitment from the government, which will commit a government in the future to finish this road, which I acknowledge should have been done many, many years ago. And I don't fault any one government because been a number of different governments from all 3 parties in charge at one time or other. So, but I'm glad that I've been able to do my small part to get it as far as we have. And also the momentum that we created in the face of all the challenges that the lingering pandemic brought in 2022 fills me with an overwhelming sense of optimism for what's possible for the coming year ahead. That's not to say there won't be challenges ahead. I'd be the first to acknowledge that. As we all know, there are many global, social, and economic pressures being felt by residents and businesses in every corner of our region and province. But in so much as we can plan to face these potential challenges head on, I believe that we have the right government and the right leadership of Queen's Park to do that job. A month ago, just over a month ago, the 2022 Fall Economic Statement was introduced and passed at Queen's Park, outlining the Ontario government's plan to continue to build Ontario. And we continue here locally to build a better Sarnia Lambton. That's always been my goal. That's been my endeavor. And I know everyone on this call, to one extent or the other, wants to see the same thing for their municipalities and for the chamber and all your members. The fall economic statement highlighted a flexible and responsible plan to build our province and rebuild it following the pandemic. It also positions the province to be ready to manage uncertainty and risk in the face of emerging global economic challenges. I know that the Minister of Finance, being very prudent, set aside a fund of over $1 billion. He called it a rainy day fund. Every business person on the call knows that the vagaries of the economy, what can happen, anything. Well, who could predict COVID-19 coming and putting the federal and provincial and municipal governments and business in such a strait? But we've come out of that, so we need to be prepared as we do come out of this further to help grow the economy, get shovels in the ground, and build that key infrastructure. Address the labor shortages I talked about with the Skilled Trades Ontario. Minister McNaughton's working on that. I talk to him every day, 2 or 3 times a day, and I know that he's laser focused on that. It's our plan to maintain fiscal flexibility so we can support people and businesses today while building for the future. To date, Ontario's economy has proved very resilient in economic uncertainty due to global geopolitical conflict, elevated inflation, rising interest rates, and continuing supply challenges. But our government recognizes we're facing a difficult road ahead. I know the minister, also the premier, intends to make sure that we always have local source wherever we can, whether it's PPE, personal protective equipment, or medicines, anything we can do so we're not held hostage once again to the other countries around the world or supply chains that we can't rely on. So that's something that we're planning, working on. There's many advancements made in that regard. By preserving flexibility, the government's prepared to provide targeted support to people and businesses while maintaining a plan to reduce Ontario's debt. For example, as noted in the fall economic statement, the government is providing Ontario's small business, which a number of on this call today, with at least $185 million in tax relief over the next 3 years. We know businesses in this province have suffered throughout COVID, and they are going through supply chain challenges, and they are going through labor shortages. I think every restaurant or drive-through that I see in Lambton, they've all got a sign of restricted hours, reduced hours. Sometimes, they apologize, say, look, we just can't be open. We don't have enough staff to stay open late at night or all night to drive through. So everybody's in this event. The turmoil and the turbulence in the marketplace, but we also have absolute faith in the business community and the people of Ontario, and I certainly do here in Sarnia Lambton. We'll come out of this stronger than ever. But if we can give a helping hand to those entrepreneurs and businesses here in the province to get through it, we'll do that. You may recall that in April of last year, our government also issued WSIB rebates to safe employers across the province, and that came to a total of over $1.5 billion. Businesses here in Sarnia Lambton, for anyone that don't know, received nearly $8 million. So that's in the city and out in the county. And I forget how many businesses, I don't have that in my notes. But the government also is temporary. And now I just want to make clear too that those dollars that went to those employers, it didn't come out of the fund that would pay the employees or the people, the injured workers. It come out of the surplus. So it didn't come out of a fund that would pay the workers themselves. So that money's still safe and still allocated. Government also is allowing businesses to accelerate their write-offs of capital investments for tax purposes, including immediate expensing of up to $1.5 million annually for eligible capital investments. And we've also cut the business education tax by over $450 million. We've also invested an initial $40 million from the 2022-23 year for a total of $145 million for the latest funding and skills development. That'll benefit job seekers and support small businesses who need those quality people. This fund has already helped almost 400,000 people take the next step in their careers of in-demand industries. Finally, and I'm coming to an end here. Finally, I just want to mention that when we formed government in 2018, we inherited the largest red tape burden in the country, and it was driving jobs and investment out of Ontario. That's why Premier Ford asked all members of the caucus with finding ways of our government to cut red tape for residents and businesses of Ontario. I'm proud to say that our caucus took that mission to heart, and just this past November, the Minister of Red Tape Reduction, we actually created the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction, introduced his 9th red tape reduction bill since 2018. Our efforts to date have saved businesses more than $500 million in annual compliance costs through common sense changes to make it easier and cheaper to comply with the rule. Our government's also focused on building a stronger province, a province with a strong economy, good paying manufacturing jobs, a province where it's easy to start and grow a business, a province where you can learn new skills, seize new opportunities, a province where you can start a career and raise a family, a province connected with new highways, new roads, and reliable public transit. I'm excited, as you can see, for 2023 and the opportunities that are ahead of us. And I look forward to working with the Chamber and everyone on this call here today to continue to transform our community and province for a better place. And like I said, building a better Sarnia Lambton each and every day. Thank you. I'm going to have to take a drink of water.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob, for that. Lots of great work happening, and I know everyone on this call very much appreciates it. So we are going to jump into our questions here. And some of them you've touched base on, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Okay. So question number 1, last year you announced $12 million in capital funding for a rehab facility in Sarnia. Blue Water Health says it will take 2 to 3 years for planning and construction. Meanwhile, we know addictions are one of our community's most serious challenges. How do you feel about the hospital's time frame to open a rehab facility? And given all the years of lobbying for provincial funding, did you anticipate a faster turnaround?
Well, thank you for that question. And I'm very proud that after many, like I said, long promised and finally delivered the dollars, I'm looking forward to have the greatest faith in Paula Zimmer, our new president, and her whole team at the Blue Water Health. This project will be delivered as soon as possible. I know they've got their people who want it already, and we need to get this right and right the first time for the individuals in the community. They deserve no less. I'm also extremely pleased that we were able to secure further funding for Ryan's House, and that was after a visit by the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. He was down here twice. He came down unannounced one time, no press, just wanted to see Ryan's House, hear about the plans from Paula Zimmer at that time, and Lori Zimmer as well. And he told me a number of times, and he's held up at caucus, he said that what we're doing in Sarnia Lambton with Ryan's House is what he'd like to see as a model across the province for mental health and support. So I'm very confident that Blue Water Health, like I say, under the current leadership and for the former leadership of Mike Lapine, it's going to move forward. And hey, if there's some way that we can accelerate that, if somebody comes to me and they want me to advocate with the minister to somehow cut, I don't want to say cut some corners, but anyway, we'll get that built as fast as we can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Are you actively working to have restrictions on carbon capture and sequestration removed in their entirety by June 2023?
Yes, thank you for that. I met with a number of local industries since those announcements were made. I'll be honest, industry wasn't happy with the original, they said, look, well, I'll tell you, I have a simple method, what I used. I said to the minister at the time, in the presence of local industry, I said, if you want someone to make a cake, tell them what flavor you want. You want an apple pie, but don't try and tell them what ingredients you want to put in it to come up with that apple pie at the end of the day. I said, tell them, the business community, what you want. Let the business community, the refineries in this case, and petrochemical, they know what makes sense. They got their own engineers. They know what they can do and what they can't do. They have to go to boards of directors lots of times that don't even live sometimes in Canada. And they got to go and explain, okay, we're going to spend, say, $500 million for a couple of towers. And what's that going to do? Well, really nothing. But, we've been ordered by the Ministry of the Environment to go ahead and do this. So anyway, I think we've settled that. And I know the changes that the industry asked me to do, and I see the question was about carbon capture. And there was one line in the provincial policy statement that they all wrote me a letter about and said, we need that one statement in there where it was illegal. actually to inject carbon CO2 or anything into the geology, the geological formation. So that's removed now. So I know industry's happy. I've been to a couple of places where I spoke, and I know that they're quite happy with the new changes. The Ministry of Natural Resources has held public consultations with stakeholders on the new regulations, and we should see those sometime early in 2023. So in my estimation, the local industries told me that they're happy. Well, I don't know whether business is ever totally happy with government, but we have to live with them, right? So we can make it as compliant as we can, serve the public good, and protect that, but as well protect those long-term jobs. And the companies are doing a great job here. All of them. I work with them all continually, and so I can't say enough good about them.
Great, thanks, Bob. And on that, there's some really great work happening here locally with our industry and community partners and through Sarnia Lambton Economic Partnership around that. So lots of great work happening here locally. When will the province announce that Sarnia Lambton is Ontario's hydrogen hub and provide the incentives to bring our unique position in the hydrogen economy to commercial realization? Alberta is far ahead of us. We want the manufacturing jobs here.
Yes, thank you for that. That's something I've been advocating for. I remember driving back from Toronto 2 or 3 years ago. Marshall Kern, I think, who was on the call, led the discussion one day about hydrogen carbon capture sequestration, and the traffic delay. I had to take a detour. I think it was about a 3-hour program there, but I listened to the whole thing, and I really got more interested in carbon sequestration and hydrogen at that time. So I agree. I think hydrogen is the way of the future. And I know there's another question somewhere along here about the refineries and that, and we'll touch on that later, but I think there's always going to be a future for the refinery capacity here, because 2/3 of a barrel of oil goes towards diesel fuel. We're always I don't see these electric vehicles, just to get away from hydrogen for a minute, I don't see these electric vehicles replacing the tractor trailers and the freight that's hauled down the roads. For small vehicles like cars and small trucks, maybe, but the batteries would be too heavy, and I don't see them. I wouldn't get on an airplane powered by some electric battery. I mean, I don't like to fly as it is, let alone get on some electric airplane. But the carbon capture and the hydrogen storage, yes, I think I've talked to the Minister of Energy, talked to the Minister of Natural Resources. They know the geology that we sit on here in Sarnia Lambton. We got the largest natural gas storage facility at the hub, at the Enbridge hub out in Don Township, just adjacent to Inniskillen Township there. And we have the geology here in Sarnia out at the old Dow storage fields. So they know that we have the storage capacity. We got the engineering capacity here. We've got the companies that can build this. And a lot of the companies already produce hydrogen here, the petrochemical industry. So I'm always ready and willing. I know right now there's a proposal in Huron County on a piece of property there to but it hasn't really got off the ground yet, but I know it's being looked at for hydrogen storage and production there. But Sarnia Lambton's in the running as well. I'll say that. I talk to the Minister of Energy at all times. My former executive assistant actually is his chief of policy. So policy direction, David Donovan, some of you on the call might remember David. So we always keep the lines open there, so to speak. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm very confident that when it comes time, we'll have the hydrogen storage here and production.
Great, thanks, Bob. The Ontario electricity grid is almost entirely carbon-free because of prior investments in nuclear and hydro, as well as renewables. Will the province commit to a carbon-free electricity grid so local businesses can export our products made with green energy? And a green electricity grid will get international businesses to commit to build here too.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question too, because I'm very involved in that as well, because the Ontario government made a massive investments in the furnaces at Hamilton to make steel. What they call green steel is made with carbon arc. furnaces, so they don't burn coal anymore. It's some process which I don't understand. There's probably lots of people on here that could explain it better than me. So we've done that already. We've made those investments both there and at Sudbury and for the Pasco and the ones in Hamilton. So they've recognized that. And I know that Enbridge currently, now this is a little different, but they've got 3 RFPs I know right now to build underground storage for electric batteries, so they could power these batteries, and that would get that on the grid, and that would be certainly green. And in late November, the Ontario finalized its electrification and transition panel, and they'll advise the government on the highest value, short, medium, and long-term opportunities for the energy sector to help Ontario's economy prepare for that electrification and energy transition. Their goal is to help enable investment, job creation, and skills development by keeping energy rates low and creating those more predictable and competitive economic environments. So I'm very, very attuned to that, and I keep between Anthony and I, we keep a close eye on what's going on. And like I say, anytime they talk about hydrogen storage, energy production, carbon capture, green energy, I always want to know, okay, I want to see it through the lens of Sarnia Lambton. How does that affect the employees, my voters, the business community that's on here today with us, and others that aren't? So I'm always interested in that, and I'm always keeping an eye out for Sarnia Lambton in that respect. And I certainly, as soon as we have something positive, I'll be glad to come back anytime and do something like this or in person. Maybe someday when we get, but I like these Zoom calls. I mean, you can see more people at one time than, it's just so much better than trying to do something. And you don't have the possibility of somebody throwing buns at you either, right?
Yes. And people can join from their living rooms. It's great.
Yeah, in your pajamas, whatever.
Yeah. Settlement area expansion in Brights Grove is vital to the success of area businesses. Expansion will increase business traffic, increase business selection, and support local construction while increasing revenue for the city and county. Lambton County and the city of Sarnia agree in principle with this settlement area expansion, but it is being delayed and obstructed by provincial policy. The Ontario goal of building 1.5 million new homes over 10 years to get it done is also supportive of this initiative. Without this expansion, there is no place to grow in the waterfront community. Are there any steps being taken to remove these provincial obstructions to allow for growth in this area?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I was in the news before the turn of the end of the year. I did some interviews, and I should never get involved in municipal or federal business, but I was asked by a reporter what I thought of expansion into the out towards the lake in the specific Brights Grove area. And I said, well, I see the city hemmed in by the river on the west and the lake on the north, and industry on the south. So I said, it only would make sense to me that we have to go east. And if people, we have some property within the city that can, handle development. But if people want to live in Brights Grove or in that general area, I said, I think they should be allowed to go and build there. So I got some headlines, and I don't know whether, like I said, I shouldn't be involved in municipal issues. But then I seen when the city applied to the county, and to be fair to the county, I don't know whether there's anybody on from the county today, but to be fair to the county, the county planner was obligated by provincial policy, like you just said, to do what he did. He turned it down because it wouldn't allow him to do that. He couldn't do that. So I've advocated with the minister. I know there's an announcement coming early, right, because we're not the only ones in that same boat. So I know that I look forward to the changes that are going to come and in the coming weeks. And I feel quite confident that policy statement is going to be removed so that the city and the county can change, if that's their wish, can change that policy development locally. So I'm confident of that. I've been to the minister about it, and I've given him the feedback from the local community and what the community would like to see. So quite confident on that.
Great, thanks, Bob. So the next question is actually a question that comes from a specific chamber member and local business here, and they are okay with me bringing this forward. as we felt it was really important, Bob, for you to see how this is affecting local businesses. So the question is, when will the court system backlog be fixed? Small claims court issues that are 2 years old are still waiting to be heard. Insurance companies have been taking us to court so that they do not have to pay our fair value tow invoices. So we have about $80,000 worth of tow invoices we have yet to be paid for. This forces us to retain a lawyer and pay court fees just to get the money we are owed for the work we have done. And that question comes from the wonderful people at Preferred Towing, Tammy and Gary Vanden Heuvel, who are actually on the call today as well.
Well, thanks for that question. And I've met many times over the years with Tammy and Gary here in my office, and worked on different issues with them. And of course, we all know them from Rescue 401, or I've seen a number of times on there as well. So yeah, the tribunals, all the tribunals are really backed up, and it's not fair to the small business community, whether you're a landlord or in their case have actual commitments they've made. Actually, for foreign work, and now insurance companies can tie this up in the courts. I think I know that I've talked to the Ministry of Justice, the Attorney General on this. All the tribunals that indirectly report back to him, and I know that there's digital jury questionnaires that they brought forth to try and speed the service up. And I know they're investing in hiring more staff, all the courts and tribunals, to try and eliminate the backlog. I can talk to the minister directly, and I appreciate Tammy and Gary. I should say Gary and Tammy. It's easier to remember Gary and Tammy than Tammy and Gary. Anyway, I will certainly advocate with the minister himself. Once it's in the court system, we can't get too involved, because the government's not supposed to, put the hand on, pro or con. But I certainly understand. So I'll advocate for more better justice, because that's enough red tape. I think we could have one bill just on the court system, just for small claims court, because I know there's a lot of people, whether it's FRO, small claims, everything is held up, and it shouldn't be that way. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bob. Since Doug Ford initially promised to protect our green belt, but has now revoked this decision, do you see this as protecting our environment, our wildlife, and our recreational spaces?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I touched on a little earlier that how we have to build, because we're at 15 million people now, and we're expected to grow by over 2 million by 2031, and even more going after that. So the bulk of the people seem to want to live in the GTA. I live down there only 6 months a year, and I don't know why. I'd rather come to Sarnia Lambton personally, or to Petrolia. I see the mayor of Petrolia on her, Point Edward, and but that's where I'd rather be. But that's not what the bulk of the people seem to want, and they want to go there. So to build those homes, we're going to have to. That's why we're building these new roads, obviously, to help people access them. And while where they are accessing some parts of the greenbelt, they're also adding over 2,000 acres to the present greenbelt. They're going to add more land to it, and any of the land that's been removed from the greenbelt, the landowners that have bought are expected to develop those plans very quickly. And it's our expectation that this construction will start by 2025, and if they don't, this land will be returned to the greenbelt. So I think there'll be a great incentive for the home builders to actually build the homes, and all the land, as I understand, is adjacent to present services that are already there, sewer, water, so they can be developed quite easily. And also, it's the commitment that people have to make, that 10% of these homes will also be attainable and affordable. To complete those communities, proponents will be required to develop and bring forward detailed plans for these sites that include public infrastructure, such as stormwater management, roads, active transportation, and schools, hospitals, all of that. So that any proponent that's going to build this, it's not just like a knee-jerk reaction. They're going to have to plan and develop these homes. If not, they'll put that land back where it should be.
Okay.
And I think I'm going from memory on this, but I think the green belt, Anthony can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's over, I'm going to say 1 million acres, in the green belt already. So what we're talking about is like a quarter of maybe 1%. Now I'm not saying that's not important, but in this scope, and I'll get the exact numbers. I don't have them. I shouldn't throw a number, but I'm sure it's over 1 million acres are in the green belt presently. And like what we're talking is like a quarter of 1%. But I'll get those exact numbers, make sure I pass them on to you, Carrie, and you can get them out to your membership, because that's a number I don't have, but I should have.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you support your party's appeal of Bill 124 that limits wage increases for nurses and healthcare workers to 1% when inflation is sitting at 6.7% and violating their collective bargaining rights that was supported as unconstitutional by the Ontario Appeals Court?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And just to go back to when Bill 124, that was right after when we had taken over government. We were faced with a massive deficit at that time, didn't know where we were going. And public sector compensation, which is all the public servants in Ontario, myself included, there's over 1 million of us, 1 million plus. And that wage bill is about $80 billion annually, including employee pensions and benefits. So the cost of the Bill 124 of increasing it past the 1% is over $8.4 billion. So the government's going to court because they believe the judge erred in their ruling, and they're going to test it at the Supreme decision, because that's a decision that the government as a whole made, like I say, over 4 years ago. And just to be a little more clear, that anyone that's been through that, as Blue Water Health starts to negotiate late March, so Bill 124 is done now. So those people that are bargaining, and they bargain with the hospital, not the government directly, Bill 124 won't affect them, because it'll be lapsed by then. That's what the Premier just said himself the other day. Since Bill 24 was implemented, we've hired nearly 14,000 new nurses to work in the province, and the government's invested billions of dollars, I know, to get them into the system sooner. And I know there was 342 million to add over 5,000 new and upskilled registered nurses and RPNs, as well as 8,000 personal support workers. And over the past year alone, we've increased base spending in healthcare by over 5.2 billion. So that's the largest year-over-year increase in the history of this province. When we look at the human health and human resources across the province, we've put in place investments to support the hiring of over 14,000 net new nurses. This is unprecedented in the province. And I want to give a shout out to the work that the nurses, the medical facility, EMS, everybody did in that. So since 2020, the province has added over 12,000 healthcare professionals in Ontario. And this year alone, the Ontario College of Nurses has registered another 12,800 nurses. So we saw a number of applications at the colleges and universities, 25,000 students applying for nursing programs at Ontario's colleges and university. So, they'll get a world-class post-secondary education there. We see a record number of students looking to join the profession, and the College of Ontario Universities say that more than 13,000 students applied to the university program this past year. The 2022 budget also introduced a permanent wage enhancement for personal support workers and the DSWs by investing over $3 billion over 3 years. This investment also supports over 158,000 PSWs and DSWs who provide publicly funded services in hospitals and long-term care. So Bill 124, like they said, that was the government's take on it, and as like I say, it's expired now, because it won't be anybody that's went through that 3 years. It's done. They'll be bargaining with their employer for hopefully advanced pay.
Great. Okay, thank you. What is the government's plan for the provision of equitable, sustainable funding for hospice services?
Okay, good. I've met with the hospice locally with their directors and with the president. I think Larry's on here today, and I actually have it on the agenda for next Tuesday at my caucus meeting with some of my other colleagues, and I know a number of people on the call know this. I learned this from Larry and others, that not every community, I assumed every community had a hospice, but they don't. So I'm working with my fellow colleagues from across Ontario that have hospice as well, to approach the government, the finance minister, for the next budget, to see if we can, I want to put it on some level playing with healthcare, so that they don't have to go out and fundraise to such a large extent. I think it's 1.6 million that we have to raise here locally. I don't have the numbers in front of me, I'm going from memory, but I know it's a substantial amount of money, and the community's been great here in Sarnia Lambton. Some other communities maybe don't have the same advantage we have here. So I want to work with my colleagues, my MPP colleagues and their hospices, to try and get this on the treasurer, the finance minister, and the minister of health's agenda to improve that funding. And there's some other issues there that during COVID, they were told they could only have so many beds occupied. And so when they did that, I think they have 10 beds and they could only have 5, but when you only had 5, then they penalized them and took money away from them. So that's not right. And so I'm going to advocate for changes there. I'll be honest, I don't know why anybody could come up with something like that, but it's government. But anyway, I'll work with them. I have it on my agenda for Tuesday. We have a caucus meeting Tuesday, and I'm the number 1 on the agenda. So I intend to bring that up with my colleagues, and we'll try and move that along down the road.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Many people in Sarnia Lambton complain that the quality of life and our ability to attract new residents and new business is challenged because of the many criminals who are arrested, only to be released the next day because the courts aren't prepared to deal with them. Police complain that the provincial rules that don't close the loop on the so-called catch and release dilemma must be changed. What is your opinion? And if you agree that catch and release must stop, what can you do about that?
Yes, well, thank you for that. And that's something I'm very, very concerned with. I agree with our new chief of police locally, Derek Davis. I know Chief Davis has spoke out about this. I know Commissioner of the OPP, Thomas Carrick. I met with Commissioner Carrick as well, met with Chief Davis. I know this is on both of their agendas, especially because of just in Ontario, we've lost 5 officers in the last month and a half, 2 months at the most. And so, I mean, a lot of these are tragic, just and people that should be in jail or incarcerated, they're out on bail. They've skipped bail. That one gentleman, he'd been gone for at least 6 months or a year, and no one, I don't know whether he was looking for him. And he more or less ambushed that young officer that died here about 3 weeks ago. So I support them fully. I know my minister, Michael Kersner, the Minister Solicitor General, is on the same wavelength. I've heard the Premier express the same. Now, the bail and those reforms are a federal government responsibility, but I'm not trying to shirk any responsibility. I know we at the province are going to do everything we can with our federal counterparts to make those changes. The judges have a lot of discretion, but they're, some changes were made federally a number of years ago. Like under the Harper government, they wanted to keep people incarcerated, and the new government, when it came in 2015, made changes to that. I don't like to get political. I'll leave that to other people, but that is a fact. So we're going to be advocating very strongly. I don't know whether we can get any. I'll be honest, with a minority government federal, I don't know whether we can get the kind of changes I'd like to see. But we'll work on that anyway. And I know there's going to be a great pressure from the province, the largest province in the union here, with Ontario, 40% of the dollars and tax dollars, 40% of the population. So I think it's up to Mayor John Tory as well to speak to his federal members in Toronto to make sure they put the pressure on the Prime Minister to, hey, we need to see changes. And there's been a lot of this violence in Toronto. So I think there's some market for that in the GTA to see changes. And I know my Premier, I agree with Chief Davis locally, and of course the OPP Commissioner of Ontario. So I think between those 2 or 3 levels of government that we should be able to make some kind of changes. I know the Ministry of the Attorney General is engaging with law enforcement and municipal leaders on those issues that we can change. But like I say, a lot of it is with the federal government. I don't like to, not trying to throw you know, I want to take my responsibility as well, and I'll do everything I can do, and I know our government will as well. That's my answer for that.
Thanks, Bob. So we have time for one more question, and this question has a preface to it, and we felt it was very important to read this. So please bear with me.
Yep.
On June 29th, 2021, Prime Minister Trudeau announced that Canada would ban the sale of gasoline-powered cars and light trucks in 2035. That announcement came after both Quebec and BC set similar goals and targets. The European Union made the same announcement only 2 weeks prior. California recently announced the same ban for 2035. The USA Secretary of Transportation announced that he's hoping the federal government will follow California's lead and do the same. There's no denying it. New gasoline cars and light trucks will cease to exist globally in just a dozen years. After that, the balance of gasoline cars and trucks on the road will rapidly collapse. Sarnia has 2 refineries that produce gasoline, and one more is in Corunna. Those refineries employ hundreds, maybe thousands of your constituents directly, whose salaries are rolled right back into the local economy to support thousands more jobs. Additionally, those refineries purchase goods and services from countless local businesses, furthering their impact on the local economy, likely to the sums of tens, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And let's not forget about the taxes paid by these same refineries and the contributions these industries and their employees make to local nonprofit organizations, which directly assist the underprivileged in our city. The Canadian and USA markets simply will not be able to support 3 area refineries by 2035. Even worse, consumers won't wait until 2035 to purchase electric vehicles. While the number of e-vehicles is currently small, I can assure you that their market penetration will grow quickly as we approach 2035. Closure of major employers and the supporting businesses in our area will have a double whammy effect. Not only will revenues decrease substantially, but so will our need to support more residents who will suddenly find themselves unemployed. So the question, have you visualized the impact of the gasoline vehicle ban and how it will affect Sarnia Lambton? What plans does the Ford government have to address this situation, recognizing that we cannot wait until 2034 to take action? We cannot wait. We need to act on this directly and with full commitment.
Thank you. Yeah, so this question really interests me because right from the get-go, when they started talking about electric vehicles, I was thinking, okay, how's that play back home? Because I always, as Tip O'Neill used to say, all politics is local, right? So I always look at, like I say, a lens to how does this affect Sarnia Lambton? How does this affect my voters, my community, the people that I know? I got family that work in the trades, I got family that work in industry, friends. So I'm very interested in this. I don't have just a arm's length view like maybe some members in Toronto or somewhere might. This directly affects the people I socialize with and work with and every day. So I've taken the time to speak with the Canadian Fuels Association. Now they're the big representatives of all the refineries and the petrochemical industry about the federal ban, and what I've been told by them. I just spoke with them again just yesterday, that based on their predictions, they do not expect a meaningful impact on the production from Ontario refineries. We actually have, I think there's at least 4 in Ontario. We have one at Nanticoke as well. It's the Imperial Oil refinery. I've worked with them on some changes that I talked a little earlier about the sulfur changes that we needed, the SO2 regulations. So they see, the Fuels Association, this is Bob Bailey saying this, they see increased demand for diesel trucks, jet fuel, and new low carbon fuels of the future, which they feel will replace any loss in demand for gasoline. Now, these are the people that lobby and represent the refineries. This is them saying it. Canadian Fuels has already started discussions with the federal and provincial governments and how these new low carbon fuels can make a difference as part of this new energy mix. However, when it comes to EV production, I'm also very interested in the advance of the Ring of Fire project in Northern Ontario. I just spoke with the Minister of Mines last night before I went to another event, and he gave me a kind of a 15-minute update on how the critical minerals that we need to make electric batteries, where they're going to come from, because it's great. I hear the United States talking about they're going to build all these cars, but they also say, but we don't want to have to rely on China anymore, like we did with PPE and pharmaceuticals. So it's my understanding from talking to the Minister of Natural Resources, who was in the mining business for over 40 years, that those minerals are available in the northern Ontario, up in the Canadian Shield, the Ring of Fire. You heard lots of people talk about the Ring of Fire, all very doable. Silver, cobalt, and nickel, all available there to make these new lithium batteries. So I think the provinces, not the province, but industry itself, have announced up until just recently $17 billion in new investment in Ontario in either battery plants to build batteries or parts to build new cars. GM, Ford, they're all getting into this. So I was always concerned, okay, what does that mean to our refineries? That's why I've had some discussions with the fuels. I'd suggest, I shouldn't suggest, but maybe I shouldn't be suggesting what you should do, but maybe you should have the Canadian Fuels on someday for one of your, and they can answer all these questions a lot better than I can, but they're very positive on Sarnia Lambton's future and Natico, the refinery there. So I felt a lot better when I like to get excited about these new investments too, these EV investments, but I also want to make sure that we look after the current jobs that we have now and long-term commitments. I tell you, I don't want to be a wet blanket on these EV cars, but look, I remember the Kyoto. I know there's people on here who remember the Kyoto Agreement a number of years ago. They all admitted afterwards, under a former prime minister, they said, well, we knew we couldn't meet those goals, but we said it anyway, because that's what people wanted to hear at the time, that they were going to enforce all these things. And they never, I don't think they came anywhere close to meeting those goals. So all the hoopla about 2035, I'll believe it when I hope I'm around to buy one in 2035. I might be riding around one, whether I'll be driving one or not, I don't know. But so I'm very positive on the fuels and the local refineries having a role to play, whether it's in, like I said before, the batteries, I feel won't work on these big diesel trucks for the freight. So they'll always be powered by diesel. And as I said, as I understand, 2/3 of a barrel goes to of a barrel of oil goes to diesel fuel right now. And there's always aviation fuel, which we're always going to need here at Detroit and at Pearson. I think 75% of the fuel, the aviation fuel in Sarnia goes to Pearson. The rest, I think, goes to Detroit probably. But anyway, so I'm very confident in the future of these refineries, but I'm also hopeful and looking forward to this new industry. I can't hardly comprehend, like the Nova plant, the new, how long that took out in Rokeby there. It's not quite opened yet, but it's virtually mechanically finished. That represents over $3 billion in costs, to build, the manpower to build it. So, okay, so 17 billion. And I know there's more announcements coming, more for St. Clair Township. I can't say what they are yet, but I know the minister tells me we're this close to more investments out there. The Diageo distillery, the new type jobs, $250 million plus there. So I'm a guy that always sees the glass half full or more. So I'm very optimistic. I like to be positive that way. And so I felt better after I talked to the fuels people yesterday, because I know they're in tune with their own members, the refineries and the petrochemical industry. So, hey, I'm always an optimist for Sarnia Lambton, and of course the chamber, which great work you do with your members to advocate. And I guess I better finish up there. I've probably taken more than enough time.
No, that's great. Thanks so much, Bob. And we are over in time, and so we really appreciate that you've stuck around with us and answered these questions. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us today and for all your hard work at Queen's Park on behalf of the Sarnia Lambton business community. These questions and the many, many more that were submitted that we couldn't get to today are evidence of the significance of these issues to our chamber members. And we greatly appreciate the time that you've already given and are willing to give in the future to listen and learn about these issues. And we really appreciate that you were here today to answer some of these. And like I said, Bob has agreed to take the questions that we didn't get to today. We'll send off to him and he will respond. And as well, anything after this town hall that may come up that you have questions for, feel free to send them along to us and we'll make sure Bob gets them. So thank you so much, and keep up the good work on behalf of Sarnia Lambton in Queen's Park. And we'd love to do this again, maybe later on in the year, and get some updates from you.
I'm looking forward to it, Carrie, and thanks again to the work that you and the chamber do each and every day. And of course, like I said, my municipal colleagues that are on here and the business community, of course, working hand in hand. And those industries are important because I think of the United Way, the millions of dollars that they donate to all these workers here. This is a great giving community. I drive by that sign at the hospice every day when I'm in Sarnia. Different companies are up there helping with the food and services and that. So it's a great community to be from and proud to represent in Queen's Park. So thanks again.
Great. Thanks, Bob. And thanks everybody for joining us today on your lunch hour. Have a great day.
There's screenshots.